And that's what I love about watching Larson. I mean, I'm probably one of the biggest Kyle Larson fans the world has,
Oh
and
God.
most people don't even realize it.
I say he's
Because
I say he's one of the best drivers all the time. I just I
he is.
he is.
It's a
He's one of
fact,
the
though.
greatest
It's not
drivers of
even
all
for
time. There's no
speculation.
debating it. I'm not debating that. I still do think that there are a lot of guys who are just as good that don't get the same opportunities as he does. And we need to start giving it's back to the sprint car late model fan base. You know, we need to start giving envy to other guys and separate the two logically. You know, some people will say Kyle Larson drives all these different cars and does all these different things, but at the same time, 3 years ago you could have had the debate on who's better, Bell or Larson. But now because Larson got opportunities more than Bell, now he gets to be put in another category technically. It's
Listen, I
all
remember being,
opportunity based though, because the only separation there is the opportunity. Who else gets to drive all these cars? First of all, you
right.
know, we ain't picking up the football and throwing it all the same.
Yeah. I remember being at Atlanta, and Larson and I were in my motorhome, and we were watching a Western States race. And he was like, "Hey, we got to make sure we catch this." And I'm like, "It's a Western States USAC race. What are we so excited about?" And he goes, "There's a guy in here you got to watch." And I'm like, "Really?" And I said, "Who's that?" He goes, "Christopher Bell." I'm like, "I've never heard of him." He goes, "He's better than me." And I've never heard Kyle Larson say anybody was better than him. And I've never heard Kyle Larson say I'm the best either.
Now, was he joking?
Definitely. No,
Okay, he was
no, he was
serious.
dead
Okay.
serious. That's the reason we watched that night, was to watch Christopher Bell. And he goes, he's better than me. So yeah, I think give Christopher an opportunity in the late model, he'd figure it out. I
Right.
mean, but he hasn't,
And
but
well,
not
my
everybody.
point is, how many other guys are just as on that level? They just at 16, they didn't get picked up by a TRD. At this age, they didn't have this opportunity. You know, talent can't be taught. You know, it is a natural deal out there. Look at Ricky Thornton Jr. I think he's one of the last guys who have technically made it to the top in his division on talent. I mean, he put a IMC modified on a flatbed at like 22 and went off and just won his way literally to where he is today. Um,
I think every generation has a certain number of it. I mean, Kyle is this generation, and Christopher's right behind him in that. There's every generation had it. I mean, Jeff Gordon was that generation, and I was the generation after that. Even though Jeff and I were the same, I was like a half a generation behind him. And when Jeff left, then there wasn't that guy, and then I got that opportunity and had my triple crown year in USAC. Kyle's just that guy in this era. The fun thing is, we talked about AFC and UFC and all this stuff and trying to get everybody together. Um, if you sit there and have the opportunity to take the best of all these generations and put them all, that's the race. That's the race. If we all get to go to heaven at the end of the day, that's my dream, is to sit there and race against the best of every era and put those guys together and all get to race together. That's when you see how good everybody really is. Because when Richard Petty was in his heyday, those cars were way different to drive and
right.
manhandle back then than they are right now. What I'm driving, what this guy, it's really hard to compare who's the greatest of all time. You can't really do it because
Right.
there's so many variables that are different in the equation. But every generation you can say that's the greatest. That's the greatest of that generation in that time. And Kyle's that guy right now. I mean,
Right.
you're right. Trust me, I've seen it. There's guys left and right that can drive race cars that don't get opportunities. You know,
Well, and at
there's a
least
guy
in
I
the late
like.
model world, you have opportunity to race your way to the top. I just feel like
Yes.
when we're putting NASCAR and IndyCar and all that, it's almost impossible for a regular person to go get a job, work it, get a college degree, and then get there. It's like impossible. Or at least in the late model world, they got a chance, you know, to do that.
Well, and I think there is in all forms of motorsports, but there's not many chances and opportunities. I mean, guys, it is hard to get those opportunities to get with good teams. But the hard part is by the time you work your way up into a good car, it was like you mentioned earlier, when I was 25 and getting my cup season
Yeah,
started, hell, I was old in today's standards. So now,
that's not
how do you
right.
how do you
That's
find those guys now? How do you
yeah.
go back and find this guy at 12 or 14 and know whether he's really
Right.
the deal?
It's a
So
broken system. I think that's a broken system, how it's set up right now. It's attuned to one side, but I also think that's a fan deal. You know, I think the sponsors started playing more of a fact than winning. You know, and funding for teams, the proper funding for cup teams in general went away from winning and performing to sponsorship dollars. And that's how we operate, is how we can afford. I think that's why they want to restructure all the charters so they can get proper funding to the team, so they ain't just depending on some driver to bring money. But back to the whole situation, like Larson and Bell and these drivers and stuff like that. I think sprint car racing's missing out. I think that, I mentioned to you yesterday when we talked, Steve Kinser won 50K at the Kings Royal when Dale Sr. won 47 in 1984. So there was a period when sprint car drivers were sometimes bringing checks in bigger than some cup guys. Not all the time. Obviously, they still had their Daytona 500, probably paid more than that. But this was a regular cup race. I always had the theory that Cole Trickle killed the sprint car star, because I don't think Kinser was second tier to anybody in cup racing, and Ken Schrader was racing at that time in cup as well, with Rick Hendrick in the 25, I think, after Richmond. But it seemed like that icon shifted, and since then, the big name has been the transfer driver, the guy who goes, the guy who leaves. And that credibility isn't given to the sprint car star. The pay isn't given as much. It hasn't increased as much as we've all liked, obviously. And costs are way more. 50,000 to win in 1984. A brand new dually was 6,500. The best dually on the block. A Corvette was 12 grand. So I mean, it was different back then. I think we are missing out because we don't pay or have enough money in sprint car racing to retain, in my opinion, our modern Swindell and Wolfgang. Maybe we'll say that David Gravel is our Steve Kinser in the sprint car world right now. Let's say that, if you were to add Bell and Larson in on our tour right now, we'd have one of the best. Our product all of a sudden just destroyed every product in the block, and I think NASCAR knows that. And Corey Day, bring Corey Day back too. Now we got a product that is bigger, or the best product you can have in motorsports.
If the money was equal, I am telling you, and I'm not going to speak for Kyle, because Kyle and I've never had this conversation, but I feel very confident in this statement that if the money was equal, that Kyle Larson would be in a sprint car, not in a cup car. I feel the same way about Christopher Bell. I feel the same way about Chase Briscoe. And like I said, I've never had a conversation with any of these guys about it. That's my gut instinct. I'm saying that's what my gut tells me, is that if the money was equal, they would be on dirt. They would not be in NASCAR right now.
Right. Well, and you think some people would see the investment in that. Flo's got $100 million in capital. Let's spend it. I mean, there's your fix in a way. I mean,
but it's something that you get to make a difference. I mean, shit. They've never, my whole time in Cup, we never had motors that had the same horsepower as a sprint car motor. But then NASCAR went and neutered these things and got down to this 550 horsepower package, and I don't know what they're up to now. They're around 600 or a little over that. I mean, when they cut it, we were at the peak when I was still running. We were up at around 875 horsepower. And when they cut it down to 775, I felt like I was racing a Briggs and Stratton, and it pissed me off so bad. I'm like, everything that made me good in a car was my right foot and being able to modulate and manage the power and take care of my tires. Well, you just keep taking power away, and then when the guys leave the corner, they just flat foot it. It doesn't take anything. So it takes all the power you can get it, because it doesn't have any power. So now you've taken bad race car drivers and made them okay. You've taken okay race car drivers and made them good. And you've taken a handful of the good race car drivers and put them in a great category.
And you can make an okay race car driver in a really good car look better than a really good race car driver in a bad car. Look at Kyle in the 42 car. Look at Kyle in the Ganassi ride. I mean, I don't think he got better just because he said a bad word and won some dirt races. He got into a Hendrick car.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's what's happening currently with Kyle Busch, personally. I don't think he's lost an ounce of talent. He's just not in one of those premier cars.
You put Kyle Busch in a premier car, he's going to go out and win races just like he always has.
Right.